The new novel, which will be out soon, is called The Last Word, and it tells of the relationship between an older writer and a younger one, and may or may not have something to do with V.S. Naipaul and his biographer, Patrick French. Can you tell us what the book is about?
I've written a novel that's coming out. It's a shame it's not out yet. You can't read it. It's coming out in January or February next year, and it's called The Last Word. And it concerns a very, very cantankerous, grumpy, old Indian writer, not based on me. And it also concerns a very young, good-looking, attractive young biographer, not based on me. And really it's about the relationship between two old writers, and there are also, of course, two or at least three women in the story. And I was really interested in this story about the situation, the two writers together, the women, and interested in thinking about really what I do for a living, which is, and you do for a living, which is that we're writers, and what writers do, and what we mean, and why I'm here sitting in front of you, and why you're not at home writing. I'm writing, in a sense, on your behalf. What writing does, what writers mean, what writing stands for, what the point of it is, why we have poets, why we have poetry, what the figure of the writer means, as opposed to, the text they may or may not write, and all that stuff, and how we romanticize writers, how we imagine that writers have lots of sex, how they drink all the time, how they take drugs, they live very decadent lives, but because they're artists, they're allowed to do that, and they can do stuff that, normal, ordinary clerks can't do. So I'm just interested in the situation, the place of the writer, what we allow and want the writer to be and do for us.
Here's a phrase from that novel, which also ties into something you said at your keynote address yesterday. The writer should be the very devil, a disturber of dreams and wrecker of fatuous utopias. And at one point, the old writer in the book says the novelist is a trickster, deceiver, con man, and mostly a seducer. Is that true?
Well, as you know, in India, particularly in India, we writers are trouble. No sooner does anyone in India pick up a pen than they're on their way to jail, I've heard. And one of the great things I always think about my home country, Pakistan, is that there are more journalists in prison in Pakistan than any other country in the world. And it's a great fact that I'm very, very proud of. Second is Mexico. So there's something very dangerous and very devilish about writers and writing. And it's a devilishness and a dangerousness that we require. The poor writer has to go ahead, with his pen writing stupid stories for which he is then condemned as an insulter. And somehow it's clearly something that we as writers, it's a position that we want to be in, it's something that we like to do, that we need to do, but it's also the position that you, the audience, the reader, puts us in. We are doing you a favor. We are dreaming your dreams. We are doing it on behalf, you might say, Salman Rushdie was speaking the unconscious of the Muslim. He was speaking the repressed of the Muslim. And he paid a very, of course, as you know, very high price for that. But he was also doing us all a big favor for going to the trouble to say it. And that's what we as writers do. We say difficult things. Somebody's got to say difficult things. You couldn't have a society at all if people didn't say difficult things. And in a sense, you might say you might need to return that, let's say, to the reader, that the reader themselves wants to think and say difficult things. And the writer might invite them to do that.
We're going to open this up for questions because we're coming to the end of this session. So if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll pass the mic to you.
Hi.
Yes. Yes.
Do you read criticism of your works, and has there been any piece of criticism which has actually helped you? And how much do you bother about it?
I couldn't hear what he said. Will you repeat it?
Do you read criticism of your work, and is there any criticism of your work that's helped you, or do you not bother about critical responses at all?
I work a lot when I'm working on a book, particularly, or on a movie. Probably Jeet's the same, any writer's the same. I would share my work to a selected group of friends that I have. I will work a lot with my editor. And when I'm doing a movie, I would think a lot with the director about what should be in this scene or what should be in that scene. So that form of criticism, when you're developing a story, working on a story, is very, very helpful. And you can never grow out of that. You know, when I'm working with my editor and I hand him the manuscript, he gives it back to me, and I see a pencil line going, you know, it's like a shot, a knife through your heart. Then you turn over the page, there's another pencil line going through. Turn over the page and you think, God, he's got a long, thick pencil. But you really have to then think about this sort of criticism. I mean, reading a review afterwards is no use to you then. It's too late, it's pointless, it's not really going to help you at all. But when you're working on a book, if you were smart, you'd really listen to other people. And I think most, any writer who is intelligent would take advantage of other people's intelligence in order to think about their work, to make it tighter, to make it more economical. You repeated this, that, and the other, to move that over there. Basically, that's what we're doing as writing teachers. You know, we're working as editors. That's what a good editor would do for you, and that's what I could do for somebody else. I could say to my writing student, why don't you try that? Why don't you move that over there? Why don't you start the story earlier? Why don't you come in later, do this, that, and the other? So we all need people like that, because you can't, in a sense, be in two places at once when you're writing.
Yes, over there.
We'll just take that one first, and I'll pass the mic here in the meanwhile.
Sure.
I actually have two questions to ask you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go on.
One is, critics have actually cited influences on you, on your work, like Orton and Osborne, and I get the feeling that none of them have been influences on you, and I think you're your best influence. What do you have to say about that? The other thing is, somewhere you have said, England belongs to me, baby. What is it like to be in Britain today, whether as a writer or as a non-writer?
The lady over there is asking what it's like to be in Britain today. Well, I'm not really in Britain, I'm really in London. And London is really, it's a country, it's like Bombay, you know, it's a country, I guess. It's a country with another country attached. To be in London is fabulous. It's fabulous to be in London because I really feel that throughout almost all of my lifetime, London has been, despite the difficulties of living in that city, which are probably similar to the difficulties of living in this city to get anything done at all, that it's a very really creative place to live in, you know. That in London there is fantastic theatre, fantastic music, people writing books, people making videos, people being in bands, you know. There's something about the London, or let's say English or British character, that is very, very anarchic and very what we call bolshy, you know. And you found it in punk, and you find it in The Who, and you find it in Florence and the Machine, and you find it... I was listening to a band in the hotel earlier with my son, Sachin, listening to a band called London Grammar, and I thought, they're so great, you know, they're so great that there is so much going on in this city. So for me, to be in London is to be in a place that's creative, at least. And there are huge social problems, as you can imagine, you know, problems to do with poverty, problems to do with inequality, problems to do with lack of opportunity, etc., etc. But still, you feel in London there's some, you know, that everyone is up to something creative, and there's something very alive about the spirit in London. And much more so, let's say, than there is, say, I don't know, say in Milan or in Paris or even in Berlin, which is known to be a creative city. You really feel that London all over is bursting with people wearing unusual clothes, having their hair cut, having tattoos, writing books. And I love that sense that everybody's being creative, that everybody has a bit of creativity in them, as opposed to the idea that everybody is not creative and that the writers or the artists or the painters or the musicians are only the creative ones. I like the idea that there's an equality, you might say, in creativity, that people are, you know, more creative than they like to think, more creative than they are able to acknowledge. And I think that that makes London, for me, to answer your question, why it's worth living in.
Hi.
Question at the back.
When you are in the process of writing, when you are on the journey with your character, do you have a predetermined end in mind, or does the character lead you to that end? And what role does research play therein, in that process?
The gentleman there, I think, was asking about how a story develops. Well, it really does. It really does develop. I was writing this morning in my room, and I was thinking about a character that I was working on. And I thought, when I began this story a month ago, I had no idea that that character would do that. I had no idea that he would become like that. But I must have done the research already. I must have thought about a character being like that without thinking he would be in a book, or in a film in this case, for instance. So all writers have done research, and the research is called living. You know, you've all had the misfortune and the great fortune of having parents, of being children, of being teenagers and living in the world with all its difficulties all the time. And I would call that research. We've had lives, you know. And everybody's life, actually, if you went around this room and you asked everybody to tell the story in 10 minutes of their life, you would hear stories that would make your hair stand on end and then go grey. You know, the stories would be so amazing. So you don't have to worry about research. I think in a sense you've done it already. You've lived it already. I think what a writer does is begin to look, you might say, into his or her unconscious and find the stories that are there already and kind of release them from the box. But they're already in there.
Lovely, thank you.
There's a question here.
Jeet?
Yes.
Hi, I'd like to know a little bit more about the process that you follow while writing for films or movies, and what inspires you to do the same.
We can't really hear you. Did you say the process of writing for films?
Writing for films is a real pain in the ass. It's a real pain in the ass and really fun. It's a real pain in the ass because you're really working with a lot of people, and so that your work will go through the processor, you might say, of many other people. So you have to really be wary of who you're working with. So if I were you, try and work with people you get along with on the whole. But that's very difficult. That's like saying try and make sure you have nice parents. It's easier said than done. And then you're basically writing a map. You're giving directions as a movie writer. You're giving directions to other people. You're not writing literature, you're not writing philosophy, you're writing a map. You're saying go ahead, turn left, turn right, go through that door, go here, go there, and maybe you've got a chance of getting to the destination. That's all you're doing. It's just like a map. And it's as uninteresting as a map is, but it shows other people then what to do. What you see, what the audience will see on the screen are these two beautiful, heavily made up, very attractive actors saying these great lines, but actually you just what you've actually written is very crude. I wouldn't advise it. Give up is my advice. Give up now and go and do something useful.
Hello. Hanif, I'm here. Imran Merchant is my name, based in Bombay. In the course of your just a recent conversation and what you were talking, you raised a very fundamental issue. I would like to take you back to that. This issue of what we claim is the creative freedom, the total freedom of the creative person, versus censorship or control from the society. Now, down the centuries we know that those who are radical, those who are entirely creative, they write, they do their own thing. They've been censored, they've been imprisoned, according to you also. They've been poisoned, they've been killed, they've been attacked uniformly. So my question to you is a bit different. When you go for that kind of freedom that you gave an example of Salman Rushdie, though you didn't mention the name of the book in question, which was Satanic Verses particularly, why do you think the majority of the people in the world, the normal people, the receivers, the readers, why do you think that in the stage of evolution in which we are at present, that they cannot take that kind of a radicalism, that freedom, they cannot accept in their stride what a Hanif Qureshi or a Salman Rushdie or somebody else is saying? Please.
I couldn't quite hear everything, so could you just repeat it to me?
You know, I wish I could. I wish I could. I missed a lot of it myself. But I think it had something to do with the satanic verses and why it's such a lightning rod, and why readers all over the world. I think he's back.
Jay,
Say it really simply, because
Anil, give me just 1 minute here. I'll just sum it up in one line, because I do know since yesterday the feedback and boom is such that when we are asking for questions from your people, they cannot hear clearly. Okay. I'm asking in one line, why is there from the majority of people in the world such an outrage and very hateful or volatile, violent reaction to certain creative persons, including some major writers? That's the question.
Why was there such outrage? Well, it's the writer's job to cause outrage, and it's the reader's job to be outraged themselves. I mean, one of the things that we need to be is to be outraged by other people. And when we're outraged, we really have to think about who we are and what we believe. It's a very dangerous business, but it's worth doing, and that's what literature does. One of the things about religion is that it wants religion is a form of authority that keeps everything the same. Religion, whatever religion it is a kind of fascism that allows nobody to have new thoughts. You know, religion then becomes a kind of death. There is nothing new. And Rishti asks in Satanic verses, how does newness come into the world? And that's such a great question. How does newness come into the world? And you might say newness is what